Your former executive, Idris Yalla, has dismissed claims that taxes will scare off investment or jeopardise trade with Asian partners. He said that gas companies make a lot of noise but won't actually leave the market because they're also making a lot of money. Is he wrong, or has he just let your cat out of the bag?
No, I believe he's wrong, Chair, and for a number of reasons. And many people have worked for Shell over its long history, and we have alumni in many places. Each of them is of course, entitled to their personal opinion. But in relation to windfall taxes, and indeed Dr Henry yesterday suggested that it would also have no impact on investment. I would point, on the one hand, those theoretical arguments to actually the practice of what has happened in the UK since the introduction of the Energy Profits Levy. I know that you asked the previous witness some questions around that. But the facts are that the cumulative effect of windfall taxes in the UK has been a measurable contraction in UK continental shelf investment activity. You mentioned that you thought that might have been an industry and structural decline, Chair. Well, the UK offshore operators forecast for the period of 2025 to 2029 shows a decline in investment from £14.1 billion per annum at the time that it was introduced, down to £2.3 billion per annum over that forward estimate. I'd put it to you that it was not in structural decline, that there was significant capital investment happening in the UK continental shelf at the time, and indeed Shell was one of the companies that was investing at scale at the time that the windfall tax was introduced. It is now materially less attractive for discretionary investment. So that's a lived world practical example of what happens when you impose windfall taxes. They compress post-tax returns, they introduce fiscal uncertainty, and when they do so in a manner that offers limited downside protection for investors, then they deter the very long cycle capital investment that sustains production over the longer term, and that in turn reduces tax revenue generated from future operational projects. So in short, you get a short-term tax revenue benefit at the expense of future investment that underpins long-term, stable tax returns and jobs and energy security, and shields the country from price volatility.
On the upsetting trading partners claim, which Mr Yalla said was rubbish, do you think Australia would be portrayed as unreliable if we increase the taxes on Shell?
So can I
can repeat it.
Yeah, no. Sorry, I was okay. I understood the question. Sure. I was stumbling over my words, sure, because I was going to say that I'm assuming you're not suggesting an increase on Shell specifically, but an increase in taxes on the industry that would apply equally to us. So I think what our regional trade partners want to see, and remembering that they are both the buyers of our LNG but also investors in those projects as well, is that what they want to see is fiscal stability. They want to know that Australia remains committed to maximising the development of its oil and gas, and specifically LNG. They want to know that the investment settings are there that will be able to fulfil not only current binding LNG contracts, but that will be in a position, given the reserves that we have here in Australia, to be able to enter into longer-term arrangements.
So do you think, just to take you back to the question, do you think that Australia would be portrayed as unreliable if we increased taxes on gas exporters, including Shell? Is that one of your arguments?
I think we would be portrayed as a country with significantly higher sovereign risk than we had at the time that $400 billion of investment began to be put here in 2010. What we have seen since 2010, since the start of a very material, in anybody's language, phase of capital investment, has been significant regulatory and fiscal instability, whether that has been changes to PRRT, whether it has been the introduction of the ADGSM mechanisms on the East Coast, whether it has been changes in royalty regimes. We've had significant fiscal instability. The magnitude of the changes that have been proposed here are not insignificant. They would be major changes to fiscal settings after the investment's been made. And so, yes, absolutely. And you don't need to take my word.
I'm going to need to keep moving us along.
But they've told us.
So just want to comment that South Korea is one of Australia's biggest providers of diesel, and they have restricted exports for their own national interest. Are you saying that they are an unreliable or risky trading partner? Would that logic not follow? Is anyone saying they are? Is that not rubbish?
Excuse me, I've got some ice. South Korea is a major supplier of liquid fuel to Australia. The percentage of or the volumes of liquid fuel that they provide to Australia and continue to provide to Australia are equivalent volumetrically to the volumes of LNG that we provide. I hold our regional trade partners, our customers, in high regard. And I believe that the engagements that the Prime Minister has had
so you with I'm just going to draw back to the question, but we really do have a short amount of time, and so my question is, based on the fact that they have restricted their exports, wouldn't necessitate you calling them unreliable or risky, or us calling them an unreliable or risky trading partner? Do you see?
So I'm not in the position of calling any trade partner names. Number one,
would say that Australia could be a risky. It would risk our trade relationships and reputation.
If we intervene in existing projects, if we intervene in existing contracts, if we fundamentally change the investment settings in a way that make future growth that will supply those partners with LNG, then we are, on the face of it, significantly less stable and reliable than we have been in the past.
My point is that other countries have done this. Other countries have done this, and they aren't regarded as risky trading partners. So to say that we will be when other countries are doing this and have done this and aren't regarded that way, do you see the inconsistency there?
I think you are, with respect, Chair, looking to distort. I think any reasonable person stepping back would say we would be fundamentally less reliable, fundamentally less attractive as a place to put investment funds or to contract with if we have a history of repeated interventions in contracts, interventions in fiscal settings, and if they didn't believe that Australia was serious about supporting the development of our natural resources in a way that would fulfil their contracts right out through 2040, 2050 and beyond, yes, they would consider us to be less reliable, and I think any reasonable objective person would say that.
I wouldn't, if I were you, I think I would err against bringing reasonable people into this debate, because the reasonable people that we are hearing from, millions of Australians, are saying that it's completely unreasonable that nurses and teachers are paying more tax than our gas exporters are paying on our gas. So,
but that statement, but Chair,
I'm not your PR
with respect,
firm, but I would.
No, I don't engage a PR firm. What I would say to you is that it is uncontrovertibly untrue to say that our hardworking nurses pay less tax than Australian gas companies. We pay 20.
Exactly.
They pay more tax.
We paid, as an industry, last year $21.9 billion in tax.
Gas exports? And are you
on tax? Tax.
No, we're talking about exports.
The statement that was put by Senator Hanson-Young and by yourself, Chair, was that nurses pay more tax, blanket statement.
How much is Shell paid in PRRT? Let's start there then, which is what we are talking about.
The statement, the contention that was has been made repeatedly is that our hardworking nurses, doctors and others pay more tax, blanket statement, than the Australian gas industry.
No,
and that
I
is
said on gas exports. I've always said, I've caveated it and said on gas exports. And so let's bring us to exports. So may I then take you to the question, how much have Shell paid in PRRT, not general tax, in PRRT ever?
Last year we paid $109 million in PRRT.
And what was your profit? 109 million, and your profit in that year was?
So if I may take this, Cecile, it's important to understand the PRRT regime. So
I understand the PRRT regime. I'm asking, I've got the figure, 109 million, and I'm asking what were the profits in that year?
The profit before tax for that year was $2.5 billion. We paid in total $2.2 billion, and PRRT was paid in respect to the Gorgon project of $109 million, and that was under the 2023 amendments that were brought in by the government at the time to bring forward community share of the resources. And then for our Prelude project, we'll be paying PRRT on that project from 2027.
And in the previous decade, how much did you pay in PRRT?
In PRRT for the previous decade, we were constructing projects and ramping up through startup, where the revenues were not in excess.
So it was
of
zero? Was it $0
return.
in the previous decade in PRRT?
Yeah, that is correct.
So therefore, nurses and doctors and teachers are paying more tax in income tax than Shell paid in PRRT in a decade. So I really do think that that is an incredibly valid point for the reasonable person across Australia. I'm simply pointing out the fact that you are conflating figures of tax relating to your projects within country, corporate tax, which everyone pays, every corporation pays. We're talking about export tax. And so your claim was disingenuous. So we've got tens of billions of dollars in profit and $109 million in PRRT, a decade of $0. That is appalling. It is appalling.